The win for us is progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
So as long as we're moving forward, then we're winning.
Right.
And that's what we want to do.
Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to Framework Leadership Podcast, where we talk with leaders across the globe, explore their leadership techniques and strategies for guiding their organizations to successful health. I'm your host, Ken Engel, president of Southeastern University.
And I'm your co-host, Michael Steiner, senior vice president for advancement and innovation.
And we're excited to introduce our guest for today's show, Pastor Dan Hunter. Dan serves as the lead pastor at Grace Church in Houston, Texas. He and his wife, Rachel, have spent over 30 years in marriage and ministry together. Dan is also an SU alum,
Yes.
which we're grateful for, holding his master's in ministerial leadership from SCU. Again, thank you for taking time to be with us today.
It is an honor to be here, man. It's great to just be a part and see what God's doing firsthand.
Yeah, well, we're grateful. And I want to start our conversation out by talking about, I know you have a deep passion for training leaders, equipping leaders to maximize kingdom impact. And I think your works is really an impressive, spans an impressive range from coaching leaders to mentoring athletes. So I want to dive a little bit into your leadership and how you help people not only lead in different contexts or in different environments, but how can they do it where it's truly transformational to their environments?
Yeah, you got to have a rhythm, you know. So for us, it may look a certain way, but obviously everyone may do it a little different. Some principles, there's got to be a gathering point, a locker room moment, you know. And so for us, we do that weekly with all of our staff. We do an all staff every single week where we lean into leadership principles. We may do more into how-tos and things like that, but it's more about building their leadership heart, their mindset, their character as leaders. And all those things are important because they all go into the same bowl to kind of make the recipe together that you're wanting in their life. And so we lean into those things. We have spiritual moments, all of it's spiritual, but we have worship and prayer, and then we lean in, and every single week we do a leadership lesson. Some of them, I try to balance it between like vision leadership, where we're going, what we're needing, things like that. More like ministry leadership, like how to lead an altar, how to think as a small group leader, and then life leadership. So it could just be leadership stuff, how to navigate transitional points in your life, and we kind of just work through those things and allow God to develop and grow us. And
it's curious you do that. When was the moment you realized that, hey, this is something I need to start leaning into with our church, giving them these leadership principles and lessons?
You know, growing up, it's pretty great. I grew up in church. My dad was always a leader in the church. He wasn't a pastor, but he was always a leader. So I grew up in church, and when I was a young kid, man, I really wanted a mentor. I never had one. So growing up, I got saved, called in the ministry, all that stuff, all in the same night. And I went to college, and no one ever taught leadership. No one ever mentored me. And I just felt like, man, these guys could stand on our shoulders, so
absolutely.
much better. And so that's my heart, man. I want people to be better than me and go further than me. And so that's where it came from. And I just kind of started diving in.
Yeah. How do you push leaders to be competitive and driven while at the same time remaining and focusing on humility and service?
That's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Because you do. I think competition sometimes can get a negative bent, and it doesn't have to be. I think competition is what makes us great.
Yeah.
So we want to be competitive. I think the real question in terms of our competitiveness is, who are we competitive with?
Right.
If we're competitive against our potential and against what God's doing in us, I think that's a great thing. Yeah. If we're competitive on who we were and who we want to be, that's great. We can't be competitive with people on our left and right. Their callings are different. Their churches, their contexts are different. And so we can't look left and right. Let's look in. Let's look ahead of us and be competitive with that. And we encourage people to do it. So we set goals, and we set goals with people, personal goals, ministry goals. And as we dive into those goals, we circle back whether it's a 6-month or a 3-month goal. We circle back with them, and we allow people, and we work with them with the goals. So one of the things we'll do is that we're like, hey, bring where you think you're going to be, and we'll bring where we think you should be. And we both go, and it's funny because a lot of times the numbers are different. Sometimes they're further, and we're less, and we're like, oh, okay, you want to go that far?
Okay,
yeah. And then sometimes the other way.
Right.
They're like setting the bar pretty low for themselves, and we're like, no, man, you need to. And so we kind of agree together in that meeting, and then come back and we reward when we focus on that, and when we reach those goals, and so we kind of use that as an opportunity to grow people. Obviously, one-on-one meetings we use. So goal setting, one-on-ones, and having clear conversations with people. And obviously, this, Dr. Engel, but what you celebrate gets repeated.
Yes.
What you reward gets repeated. And so we try to do that. In our all-staff thing we talked about earlier, we'll talk a lot about growing ourselves and being driven for something. What hill are we chasing personally in our leadership, in our ministry, in our departments, whatever it might be. But we want to chase those goals, right? And be driven towards that. But we'll celebrate the things that are going good and what we're working at. And as we celebrate those things, it reemphasizes what we're really trying to push
When you're
toward.
working with the goal setting, I'm fascinated about that. Which way, how do I phrase this? Which way do leaders most often err? As far as undershooting or overshooting themselves, which way, from your experience working with them, which way do
Honestly, for us, it's about half and half.
Okay,
Yeah,
got it. So it really is. Cool.
Yeah, because some of them, they're like, man, I want to go over because I think that's what you want from me.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or they get a little, they're like, I want to impress them, or I want to.
Interesting.
But then I'm like, hey, let's be realistic.
Yeah.
I'd rather you win.
Right.
Because a win for us is progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
So as long as we're moving forward, then we're winning.
Right.
And that's what we want to do. Now, some people are crawling when they need to walk.
Right.
Some people are walking when they need to run. So I'm not.
Exactly.
No. Well, and that's my question. I mean, so I love that part of it is when people are overshooting is because it's a imposter thing. When they're undershooting, can you talk a little bit more about what's going on there? Like, why are they doing that?
I think it's because their tendency a lot of times is just to maintain what is rather than build for what will be.
Wow.
And so as leaders, what we've got to do is we build for not what is, but we build for where we're going.
Yep.
That's the reason in a church context, I know it's different if you're working in an organization or whatever, but we're building, we may start a parking lot team when we don't need it. We may start a ministry when it's not really evident the need there yet, but it's because the vision dictates it.
Wow.
And so a lot of times what we'll do, even when we gather Easter or something. And so when we're building for Easter, we always expand everything.
Yeah.
We grow our teams, our volunteer base, our thinking, and our systems. And we change systems. We change everything, that how we do things, where we're asking them to go. Because if our crowd's going to expand here, then what we are doing now will not house that.
Yeah.
So we're always like, well, man, we're expecting so many people. We need more kids check-ins. So the reality is those things for those big days become our weekly systems.
Yep.
And now this is what we do because we're preparing for where we're going. So in an organization, it's the same thing. It's what systems, and if your company grows, if your church grows, if your leadership team grows, what are you doing now that's going to limit you?
Right.
Because there are pinch points in your leadership, and that's what you have to do. Yep. And so I like being competitive. As a matter of fact, you asked about the goals. Yep. And I think the goals, that's a good way we lean. Hey, you did this last time. Let's go here now. And so the competitive thing, Dr. Engel, that you asked about, we want them to compete against themselves.
Sure.
But we want them to win.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's good. I love it. You are talking about systems, and systems is everything to create change and growth.
Sure.
The church's approach to leadership, I think, has shifted as the culture around it, obviously shifts and evolves. What worked in the past, no matter how effective, might not resonate today with a new generation? What are some of the outdated or practices the church needs to rethink? And a lot of them aren't rethinking, and therefore they have plateaued or they're not growing. Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
That's a hard question, man.
Yeah.
Because I think it changes, but you're right, man. That is such a big deal. When I was growing up, it felt like mega churches didn't exist, as they weren't as prominent. And now there are mega churches everywhere.
Everywhere, right.
And I think it's great. But back when I was a kid, churches would have, by and large, churches would have, one lead pastor, maybe one other staff member. And now, we have churches with just, like for us, we've got about 85, on the staff. And it's just like, that's unheard of in terms of what it was 30 years ago. So the way we approach things now is so different because we're more team-oriented rather than Lone Ranger focused. And so we try to, I tell people this all the time. So one of the ways that we operate systematically is, you were asking about systems, what changes. I think it shows up in a lot of ways. How we worship, involvement, how we involve people. So for us, I always tell our team this: if you're doing your job, you're not doing your job.
Right.
Because your job is to raise people up.
Right.
And so we have this phrase we say every week, and it's, if you're doing your job, and then everyone repeats, you're not doing your job. Because I want them to know the way we operate now is not just to get our job done. Yeah. We have to raise people up, because the name of the game is raising people up to do the work of the ministry, like Ephesians tells us. And then that way, so we go about it different, and so that's another aspect of that. I think the way ministry fleshes out, the you have to know what's the purpose, what's the principle of the system. It may be to create community. Well, then how you do it isn't nearly as important if you're ending up where you need to end up. Right. So whether it's community looks different for us now than it did 10 years ago. Even how we engage people in ministry looks different. Teams look different. And so I think all those things continually shift and should.
Right. And I was listening to a podcast with Andrew Huberman just on the way in this morning, and they were talking about this tension that humans have, that we have in our brains, about having one foot in the future and one foot presently. And I think part of what you're talking about, and even with the goals, but even this part, is that tension that a leader has to have his foot or her foot in both places. How do you manage that tension, though, right? Like, how do you not get so caught up with the anxiety of the future that you miss out on how do you manage all that?
So I tell our lead team all the time. So we have a exec team, lead team, but I meet with the lead team, and I talk about that tension of where you sit in the lead team. Here's what we do, and I may be off on this a little bit, but this is just our language, right? But I say this: as a leader at this level, you got to live 80% in the future, 20% in the now. That means you're thinking of where we're going, you're thinking of vision, you're thinking of what systems need to change. And we got to make those changes before we need to make those changes, because if you wait till you need to make it, you've already slowed momentum, and you're going to create, it's so much harder.
Right.
It's like a rock on a track for a train, it can prevent a train from moving forward, but man, if that thing's going, it can run right over it. So we say that, and we say our staff, those that are under us, that are still on the team, man, they got to live 50-50. They got to have their eyes on the future, but they also got to be in the now. And then our volunteers, we got to make sure our volunteers are 20% in the future. We give them enough to know that we're going somewhere. They want to know we're winning. No one wants to go back in time and sail on the Titanic. We know how that is.
Right.
So we want to know we're winning, we're growing, but they're 80% in the now. So that's why Ephesians tells us that, the pastors, apostles, prophets, they actually equip the saints for the work of the ministry. That's the 80% in the now. Now, a leader that's 100% in the future, they're out of touch and out of date, out of relevant. You gotta be in the now.
Right.
You have to. You have to know people. You have to get out of the green room, crush the hallway. Get out in the hallway and meet with people and connect with people. And so we push that, but as leaders, we've got to be praying, making sure where we're driving is the right where, right? Not just somewhere.
I love it.
Yeah, that's good. I just want to pivot a little bit as we close out our conversation about life stewardship and how important it is to be a good steward of the way God made you, created you, the purpose He has for your life. And a lot of stewardship has to do with education and how you continue to grow and learn so that you can bring your best self to the context. And I know you have several degrees, and we mentioned it earlier. You have a Master of Arts in Ministerial Leadership here from SEU. Tell us about the value of education to you, and how has it helped to set you up for what you do, how you do it, and where you're headed in your leadership.
To lean in a little bit on what you just said, I forget if it was a Harvard Institute or something. They passed out a stat a few years ago that 93% of people, once they graduate high school, never read another book.
Yeah.
And that's unbelievable to me. Because if you stop growing, then you're putting a lid on what you need to be, and the gifts that God's already built you with. You're not being good stewards of that. And so continuing to educate yourself, honestly, in any capacity, whether it's self-taught or I learn a lot by observation and reading books and things like that, or if it's getting into a program, like I did with SEU, which is unbelievable. You've got to continue to grow.
Right.
At a pace that is honorable to who God created you to be, but also the calling He's put inside of you. So I firmly believe in that. And for me, I'm a grower. I learn by observation, by reading, by talking. Having this conversation right now, man. I love being around SEU, and seeing everything you built, Dr. Engel, and the culture and just all this. It's unbelievable. And so I've actually walking away from these last couple of days with things that I want to change.
Sure.
Just because I'm looking around going, oh my word, this is amazing. So I can learn all those ways. But when I jumped into my mammal and got my master's, it was like I was driving 60, 70 miles an hour, but then all of a sudden that pedal got slammed to the ground. So it wasn't that I was still,
right,
but it just, man, it threw me fast. It's like a roller coaster, that just takes off.
Right. Wow.
And I was already moving, but man, there was just another gear of enthusiasm, of excitement, of knowledge, of how-tos, but also just the motivation and encouragement to lead at a higher level. Honestly, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I almost started my doctorate this last fall, but I had to put it on pause. One more semester.
One more semester.
Just one more semester.
We'll see you in the fall.
Yeah, we'll see.
And if I could take advantage of you being on the mic, obviously you're incredible. Your ministry's amazing. You've worked in all these different places. You have a lot of different spheres. What was it about the southeastern mammal specifically that kind of called attention to? And what would you say if someone was looking at it, a pastor was like, should I dive into it now? Can I dive into it? What kind of advice would you give it?
Well, I mean, what drew me is the advice I'd give. Man, I think there's a lot of great institutions, but what God's hand is on this place, and the relationships I have with people here, but then also the knowledge and the excellence by which these programs operate is just, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then the ministry and the effectiveness that it's already having around you, you get to step in and be a part of that. Wow. So for me, SU was a no-brainer for a lot of reasons. And then there's something about being in part of what God is blessing is a blessing.
Wow.
And God's already here, so to step in and be a part of this, man, I want to be a part of it, and I want to be a part of not only what God's doing, but what God's gonna do.
Yeah.
And so coming to SEU, it was great.
Love it.
And it was easy choice.
Well, we love having you be part of our community.
Absolutely.
For sure.
You've brought great influence and wisdom and knowledge, and we're just grateful for being a part of it. So, final quick question here: what advice would you give students? And we have probably a couple thousand ministry students here at SEU. What advice would you give students pursuing a ministry degree and wanting to follow kind of the path that you followed in becoming a pastor and a profound leader?
Yeah, so I guess, I think the great thing is when I look around, even in chapel this morning, around the campus, testimonies, we had a lot of students from our church that have even been a part of here. I'm amazed at what God's doing already. And the advice I'd give them is sometimes things have to be your responsibility before it's your job.
Yeah.
So quit looking at ministry as a job and start looking at it as a responsibility you carry. And if it's not a job and it's more of a responsibility and a calling, then I start right now. So what I would say is let nothing stop you. The title, the position, the office, those things don't have to stop you. Get involved right now. What does God bloom right now where you are and where God's planted you? And so in that regard, don't wait. Find a local church.
Right.
Find a ministry. Get involved. And I know so many of your students are involved in missions and outreaches and community. I think that's one of the beautiful things. It even goes back and answers your last question.
Right.
Why this? Because of that. But I would encourage students, start your ministry now.
Yeah.
It's got to be your responsibility before it's ever your job. Because if a job is just a job to you, you'll quit, you'll burn out, you'll fade out. But if it's a calling, then I don't care the size of the church. I don't care, the paycheck doesn't matter as much. Other things don't matter as much because I'm where God wants me to be. And success is just being obedient to the call of God.
Yeah.
So if God's called me here or there or this or that, I can be a success. So don't wait. Jump in now.
Love it.
Grateful to have you stop by, and grateful for this conversation. And as I just said a couple of minutes ago, you are full of incredible wisdom and experience. And
thank you.
I know every time I get to talk with you, I'm always a better person. And I know if you have a chance to get to know Dan, you'll be the same. So thank you for who you are. And
well,
what
thank
you're
you
doing.
guys, both of you. And Dr. Engel, man, we respect you and look up to you. And it's a joy to just be around you. And man, you are loved and respected all over the place. And
thank you.
It's an honor.
Appreciate that.
Love it. Love it. And if you want to stay up to date with Dan, you can follow him on Instagram at @TheDanHunter. You can also check out Grace Church Houston at mygrace.com. Thank you so much for listening to Framework Leadership, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Framework Leadership. If you're watching on YouTube, now would be a great time to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you can get incredible leadership content right to your YouTube feed. You can also check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts every single week, Framework Leadership. And if you love great email newsletters, and I know I do, make sure you check out kenengel.com and subscribe to the Framework Leadership newsletter. It's an incredible piece of content we put out every single week of amazing leadership resources right to your inbox. Make sure you check it out. You can also follow us on Instagram at Kent_Engel, at Dr. Michael Steiner, on X at Kent Engel, and on Facebook at Kent.Engel. Stay up to date on all the incredible things happening on the podcast and at Southeastern University. We love you guys, and we love our followers and our subscribers. Thank you so much for listening to the Framework Leadership Podcast.